with us today we have Cyril Brun from Heidsieck. Welcome, Cyril. How are you?
I'm very happy to be there and to be able to say hello to all my friends in Sweden.
Excellent. We're very happy to have you here and to have you for 25 minutes talking about the house and vinifications and to pick your brain and of course to share glasses of champagne together.
Of course.
Online.
So we are lucky to have tonight a set of 3 champagne: the Brut Reserve non-vintage, the Rosé Reserve non-vintage, and finally we will finish with the fireworks, the Blanc Dinvinguide 2004. So maybe we can start to pop up the first bottle, the Brut Reserve non-vintage. This champagne is really the one that is encapsulating the style of Heidsieck. We do use a lot of reserve wines. It's going to be a key element in terms of winemaking to have a reserve wine that will always exceed 40% of reserve. It's probably one of the highest quantity within the industry. And yet, thanks to that, we are going to be able to really capture this kind of creamy, silky profile with super tiny bubbles. Yet, we also want to combine what you get from 2 different worlds that might look like a paradox. We want to get the freshness, and at the same time, we want to get this kind of creamy complexity, this kind of a bit nutty smokiness that is part of the style and signature from Charles. So currently, we are testing the 2015 base non-vintage. That's the one that is currently on the market. So if you think that you have 40% of reserve wines, it's going to provide really a kind of fleshy, rich experience when it comes to champagne.
Actually, Cyril, we're having the 16 base here in Sweden.
Oh, you have the 16, the new one. Yeah. So I would not imagine it had already touched your shores. It's good news because that's probably the first one with a kind of little tweaks that have been made on the recipe of Charles. I've just reintroduced a higher percentage of reserve, and we are really approaching the scale of 50% of reserve. So it means it's going to be even more Charles than ever in the past. The second key element is the introduction of oak barrels within the winemaking on a very little scale. The idea is not to get something very oaky. I don't want to get this kind of oaky footprints in the wine, but just to bring the extra layer of complexity, this extra layer of texture that will be just there, but you will not smell or feel like there is a lot of oak into the blend, because that's not the idea behind.
When you talk about the oak, Cyril, is that new or old oak?
No, it's old, of course. The new oak has too much impact on the wine like champagne, in my opinion. I mean, there are some people doing great things with new oak, but I feel like it's not really matching the style of Charles than to use new oak. So our barrels, they were new like 6 years ago. So they are 5 or 6 wines old barrels, meaning you already get enough complexity, but you don't get this kind of cliche of new barrels footprints in your blend.
Excellent. Let's taste the wine, shall we?
Yeah, of course.
Skål.
Skål.
So typically we are going to use a similar proportion of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, meaning 40% of each, and then a touch of Meunier for the other 20%. The idea is really to try to get the best of each and every varietal. The Chardonnay, of course, is going to bring this kind of energy, this freshness, this mineral touch that is very unique to Champagne. The Pinot Noir is going to bring this kind of backbone, rich, mouthful, opulent profile that you can find in various places from Champagne, from the very south of the Côte des Bars up to the Montagne de Reims. And finally, the Meunier is going to bring this kind of touch of rawness, of fruitiness, which is also going to bring a very engaging profile when you test Heidsieck Brut non-vintage.
It's very elegant, but still deep, both colors and smell, sense, and taste as well. I love it.
Yeah, it's also
Yeah, thanks a lot.
wines. It's really, it brings this complexity, I think, and it's really. This is one of my favorite standard cuvées, I think.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's really one of the most valuable, I think, or valued that you can get. And you really feel that there is so much love being put into it.
Thanks a lot. The thing is that when people taste Heidsieck Brut non-vintage for the first time, they are kind of skeptical in the way that it's somewhere between the classic non-vintage and the vintages, because you have yet the freshness that you expect to find in a regular non-vintage, and at the same time you get the complexity, the richness that you're supposed to find in most of the vintages. And probably the Heidsieck Brut non-vintage is somewhere in between when you look at the market.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a question from a follower regarding the shape of the bottle. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, of course. So it's not a joke. The shape of the bottle has been designed by a Roman designer 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
Think about that. No, to be more serious. Just below me, we have the crayères, those 2,000 years old crayères that have been dug in the Roman times, when the Romans, they were occupying and they had invaded the entire France, and they were looking for some raw materials to build buildings, to build roads, temples, and some different monuments that were part of their civilization. And yet, when they came to that very specific part of the city of France, they found this kind of huge amount of clay, just kind of no limit access to chalk. And of course, when they were digging, it was just kind of looking like a pyramid, but yet one was designed almost like this shape of bottle. And so we have had this shape just in front of our eyes for centuries, but just only recently we have been using that form as a source of inspiration to redesign the bottle, which is now the identity of Heidsieck, that is just exactly the shape of that crayère. So if you come in Champagne, and it's going to come soon, you'll be able to travel again very soon. You can come and visit us to see in real life this crayère. The crayère is the crayère number 9.
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
Yes, it is, definitely.
I've been there, so I can tell you. And also you have a photo of the crayère in the Instagram flow as well. But of course, in person, it's the best way to experience it.
A really majestic place. So
yeah. So Cyril, shall we talk about the rosé?
Yes, of course. So the rosé is a kind of sister wine to Brut. It's also a non-vintage. So a non-vintage is a wine that is made from several vintages being blended together. So in the case of the Rosé Reserve from Heidsieck, we are going to have an extra special edition of red still wines in the existing blend of white wines to really, first of all, have an impact on the color. That's how you can get this kind of pale copper color in the rosé. It will also have a big impact on the taste and the flavor. It will bring a touch of red berries, a touch of fruitiness, of course, and a little bit of tannins. We are going to use about 5% of red still wines to be added on the top of the white wines in the blend. And it's sufficient to offer extra structure, body, length to the rosé. And it makes that wine very versatile, especially when it comes to food pairing. When you have a wine of that caliber, you can really pretend to extend your experience between wine and champagne and food pairing to a different level, because it has enough structure, body to go with, of course, fish, but also with meat. And that's something I like, because very few people, they dare to try meat with champagne. And with a rosé, thanks to that extra phenolics presence in the palate, you can really pretend to have great pairings with meat.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that
works very well. I would say even the non-vintage blanc is as well, really good with meat sometimes.
But to me, the rosé, I start to really now taste a bit more rosé because it's my kind of fall winter profile, especially at Charles, because I like this rich signature. It goes well with meat, with mushrooms, and we are entering in that season.
Yeah.
And this one is base vintage 12.
Exactly.
How much?
So it's a non-vintage, but it's a non-vintage that is 6 years plus old.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the amount of red wine put into it? Maybe you said it, but I missed it.
It's 5% of red wines.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are only sourcing the red wines from a very singular place in the most southern spot of Champagne. The village is called L'Hérisset. That's the very last village before you enter in Burgundy.
Yeah.
So, and thanks to that kind of microclimate, you tend to have a kind of higher temperatures. It's a kind of milder profile of climate. You develop some Pinot Noir that are really capable to bring this kind of extra body, extra structure. The phenolics, they are very soft, very velvety. And thanks to that, it makes a rosé non-vintage that is really texture oriented. It's all about creaminess, silkiness, and you can get body and structure, and yet at the same time, it's very smooth.
I agree. It's really, really nice.
It is really, really amazing. I think there's a question from one of the ones listening now, and asking what glass would you prefer to drink the rosé in? Would you go for more sort of a bigger, like these ones, or a more gentle, the normal tulip one?
Typically, I tend to use this kind of profile of glass. I think it's the kind of perfect compromise. It's very universal. You can serve white champagne, rosé champagne. When I don't have this kind of glass, I would just buy this kind of very small size flute profile. I would even prefer to go in a kind of wide burning glass rather to go for something very, very small. I think the size of the cavity of the glass is very important. You might be shocked. I don't pay attention to bubbles because you don't judge bubbles with your eyes. You judge the effervescence thanks to your palate. And sometimes you might be tempted not to go for a kind of white burgundy because you will, physically destroy a fraction of the effervescence. You won't see a lot of bubbles, but yet I don't care since I judge the effervescence thanks to the palate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a good take home. Yeah.
Excellent. We have another question here. Will Missing Cab be released in Sweden?
Yes.
Excellent.
So you are going to have a lot of new things in the coming few months. There will be the Mise en Cave program that have been reactivated. So to make a long story short, that was something that has been released in the 80s and the 90s. And that was some older non-vintage brut that were kept a bit longer in the cellars. And they were just offering a different profile of a brut with a kind of more complexity, a bit less effervescence, less vibrant profile, something which could be perceived in between a regular non-vintage and a vintage. And yet, I think the idea was just bright. It was really a genius idea. But at the time, it was not probably the best slot to release this kind of champagne because the knowledge at the time was not the one we can observe nowadays. And now people are just going to get nuts because they are really capable to make non-vintage vertical testing. Mm-hmm. That's something unique. Normally, you make vertical testing with vintages because for most of the cases of non-vintage, you have no idea of what is the age of each and every bottle. And thanks to that, and that's still something we do on the back label, you know exactly how old is each of the bottles of non-vintage. And you can pretend to make non-vintage vertical testing. And it's super exciting because you realize that the beauty of champagne is, in my opinion, in the non-vintage making, because that's probably the one that is the most complex to make. but yet it can really age beautifully. And for many, many years, we have lied to people. We have said to people, you should drink your champagne. It cannot age so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just bullshit. You can age your non-vintage for many years. And if it's magnums or larger, it's even better.
Yeah. I love that you're saying that. And also, because that's been my opinion all these years.
That's a fact. It's reality.
Yeah.
That's what I do for my personal cellar.
Yeah. And I was able to join you with the big missing cup we have a few weeks ago, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just eye opener, big time.
So then everybody should be ready when they arrive in Sweden then.
Well, everybody buy, a few bottles every year and store yourself and see in the future what happens, especially when you're so generous telling everybody about the base vintage on the bottle.
And I think Charles Heidsieck is exemplary for this with his multi-vintage ones, because since you already have that much reserve wine in them, they have already aged a lot per place. And
I think it makes so much sense, because the notion of base year is becoming secondary, because when you are close to 50% of reserve, the impact of the main base year is really becoming secondary.
Yeah,
it's there just to give an edge to each bottle, because the impact of the main vintage is going to become minor.
Yeah,
that is true. It's true.
So I'm curious, shall we open the third bottle?
Yes, I think we do. That's a proper temperature. Talking about temperature, I tend to drink my champagne, let's say between 9-10 Celsius for the non-vintage. And this one, I've just put it out of the fridge a little bit earlier, just to make sure it would be much closer to 12-13 Celsius than a lower temperature. That's how I like it.
Yeah. Same with me.
Beautiful sound.
Yeah, definitely. Best sound in the world, I think.
So it's the Blanc des Millénaires 2004. So a little bit of history behind that. So that champagne was created first time with the vintage 1983 with another genius idea of just using 5 villages. In Africa, they talk about the big 5. In Champagne, we have the big 5. They are the Grand Cru from Chardonnay, so Cramant, Avize, Auger, Le Mille-sur-Auger, and Vertu. And those 5 components, they are just entering to the same percentage in each. So we're going to use 20% of each of those 5 village to set up the blend. So equal quantity of each. And each and every village is going to bring its own footprints. So typically, villages like Le Mesnil is going to be very mineral, very sharp, kind of smoky footprint into the wines. On the opposite side, you are going to find Auger. Auger is going to be the most fleshy profile of Chardonnay you can find within that zone of Côte des Blancs. And it's going to sometimes almost like test a Pinot, because you have this rich, opulent, mouthful profile with much lower acidity, but this kind of fleshy texture that is kind of unique. And in between, you are going to find Avize, which is going to be a bit more exotic, not on the fruity side, but more on the kind of exotic fruits. You are going to find Cramant, probably the finer in terms of profile, very mineral, and yet at the same time very flowery. And the last one will be Vertu, because Vertu is a big village within the Côte des Blancs. And yet, depending where you pick your grape from Vertu, in the north, you are going to be very Le Mesnil-like. And in the south of Vertu, you will be almost like a little bit like the Côte de Sézanne style. And yet, you are going to just adjust the final blend with Vertu. And depending on the other 4 components, we choose something that's going to be very sharp or something opposite that's going to be very round. Wow.
And what can you say about the vintage of 04?
04 has been something magic for Champagne. It came after 03 that was a super small quantity vintage. And it's going to be, you might laugh about what I'm going to say. The fruits from 04, they got ripe thanks to the sunshine from 03.
Okay.
It requires an explanation.
Yeah.
In 03, we had an heat wave and we had a lot of sunshine, a lot of energy was just kept almost like reserved by the vineyards, as we do for reserve wines, because the quantity of fruit was very small. And in 2004, there was a kind of excess of energy that was kept into the plant, into the vineyards, and that has just burst out because the quantity to ripe was there. And so we managed to ripe a kind of almost like 3 times quantity compared to 2003 with a perfect balance. When you feel like you have 3 times more fruit, you might consider it's going to be diluted. There will be a lack of something. And at the end, nothing. You had everything. You had you had the body, you had the structure. At the same time, acidity was there. Very nice balance. And 04 was really a miracle. Something we have not really retrieved since then.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's a really nice vintage, the 04. So, it's a good wine.
Yeah. So we know that there is still a few bottles left in this secret order number on the Monopoly. I will for sure order one.
Just a few.
Just a few.
Because now we have moved to the 06, and
yeah,
it's super nice wine as well. Different profile, richer, more opulent, but interesting. Especially when you test side by side 04 and 06, it's a very nice experience to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say, for me, keep the 04 and drink the 06.
Yes, that's what I've done already. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've tried to hide my wife. There were a few cases of 04, and I just offer a sip of 06, and she's fully convinced.
So, Cyril, can you tell us which is the next vintage millionaire after the 06?
No, otherwise I need to kill you. So I'm not going to tell you. There will be some more, of course, and we have done a few more. Technically, I just check and monitor the evolution of each and every wines. And yet, I'm not sure I'm going to respect the chronological order of release. It doesn't mean after the 06 it will be 7, 8, 9 or so. I don't mean I've done all of these vintages. Just by testing, I'm going to really assess which one is ready, and it might break the regular order of release. So that's why I never announced what would be the next vintage.
Good choice.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
Finally.
Typically, in the case of the Rosé 05 and 06, the 06 has been released, and then the 05. Just because when testing the wine side by side, one was ready, one was still locked and austere, and of course I'm just the winemaker. I obey to the wine. The wine is the boss.
Of course.
The wine is the boss, indeed.
So, Cyril, we have almost 5 minutes. So can you tell us just in a few words about the harvest this year and the difficulties during lockdown, perhaps, and some more words about your house?
Yes, of course. So the harvest was the earliest ever in the history of Champagne, meaning we have started on the 13th of August. I mean, it's something crazy. If you just consider that 25 years ago, it's not Middle Age, 25 years ago, typically you were starting harvesting the last week of September.
Yeah.
So it's a big change. So for those that do not believe in climate change, that's a true fact. It's too early to know if it's a good news or a bad news. Technically, I tend to consider it's a pretty good news because we tend to be more sensible to the quest of balance when picking the grapes. We are making a lot of efforts to check and monitor not only the ripeness, but also the phenolics that are now playing a growing role in terms of testing and in terms of deciding which date is the most appropriate. So interesting profile of vintage, probably more interesting for both Pinot Noir Meunier currently, and the game is not over. The Chardonnay are still a little bit behind in terms of complexity, but once more, those animals, they require an extra time to really reveal all their facets. So very promising vintage. I'm very happy with 2020 so far, and everything we test is very engaging. So we're quite happy and quite optimistic for 2020.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
So we have a question here.
So quantity was much lower than what was expected a few months before, not only due to COVID, it was mostly due to climatic conditions. So we have decreased by somehow 30% the expected quantities for several reasons. The sun has burnt a fraction of the grapes. The typical size of the berry was smaller than expected. So nothing crazy, but at the end of the day, we have really had a kind of small/medium harvest compared to what we have observed in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, Cyril. A question here from a follower is that he finds some almost metallic aftertaste in the Brut Reserve, and he wondered if you know something about that.
You should not drink champagne from a spoon. No, to be honest, that's not something we observe on a regular basis.
No,
I don't have it at all. To be honest, that's pretty strange.
Yeah,
yep.
Something strange with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are really lucky to have been talking to you and pick your brain for 30 minutes here. And hope to meet you again, both here in Sweden and
yes,
in Champagne, in Reims. And please stay safe. And thank you so much for your time.
Take good care of you all and drink a lot of champagne. I know I can trust you.
Yeah. We will, for sure.
Yes. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.